I'd like to first talk to you about a few rules within the Watercolor Society. Yes, there is a Watercolor Society. Normally I really get after you guys about erasing your original pencil lines because they're not meant to be part of your finished painting or your finished drawing. However, with watercolor, they have decided, those in charge of the Watercolor Society, they as a group have decided that it's okay to allow original pencil lines to show through the watercolor. So for instance, right there, okay? So then next, you can choose the color schemes that you want for your painting. This one is more pastel, and mine, of course, is bright, bold, intense colors. That's just what I like. It does not mean that my style is the only correct way. You can do it however you want. Things to remember within your painting, though, is that you should be including that salt technique. So on mine, I wanted mine to look like a kind of a starry night in the background, and it's at nighttime, and it almost looks like these trees are like glowing. But I started with a really dark blackish blue purple that I mixed for the top of my painting, and every single one of those squares is painted individually, and allow time for each square to dry before you paint up next to it. You don't want your colors mixing and bleeding together. And I painted mine so that my colors transitioned and got a little bit lighter towards the end of the painting or the bottom of the painting, and then I wanted my trees to be the same way. And notice here what I chose to do is that tree back behind, I painted it slightly different colors so that it did not blend in with this other tree here that I wanted to be more in the foreground. And then I also wanted, since I wanted to kind of go with a starry night type theme, I also just have little spots where there's bigger white areas. There's one right up there on the top. I also left areas of my white watercolor paper unpainted, okay? So that's what I chose to do. That is, again, not the only correct way. Another thing too, each little square should be painted a slightly different color, and you need to skip around, okay? Now, however, I bent that rule when I painted my tree trunk because I wanted there to be uniformity within the tree trunks. So I just painted a real light layer over all of my tree trunk spaces, okay? So I painted a real light brown over everything. And then later on, I went back through, after it was dried though, and I painted those little stripes that you see on there to make it look like it's kind of an implied texture of tree bark, okay? So that's what I was trying to aim for there. All right, so just a little quick watercolor demonstration. I'm gonna switch out supplies here. Give it a second to get into focus here. Something else that I need to draw your attention to. Whatever the object is, whether it's the background sky, whether it's the ground, whether it's the tree, the leaves, whatever, you need to make sure that they are similar in value, however a slightly different color. Okay, so what does that mean? Our brain needs to see the values all similar so that it can connect that area as all being the same object. So for instance, this square right here, notice that it's painted in a lot lighter value than the rest of the squares around it, which is kind of supposed to be like my so-called background of my painting. Okay, if I left it that light, it doesn't seem like it belongs to the sky at all. It's just kind of out there. Our eye is attracted to that area because the value is so much lighter. So you want to double check for those things. Now, for instance, oh my gosh, you know what? If it happens and it dries that way, because it will dry a little bit lighter, you could always just paint right back over it. Okay, so don't be afraid of that. The other thing, as you're painting along, make sure you kind of have a little scrap piece of paper that you can paint on and test your colors as you're going. And I sometimes like to mix up my colors outside here a little bit, so I'm kind of have them ready to go so I don't have to keep mixing as I go. So the other thing too, like my little area down here, okay? Now if this were my real painting, I prefer to have my pencil lines shorter, or I mean lighter, excuse me. I like to have them lighter, but I just darkened them up that much so that you could see them in the video, Okay, so you can leave them as dark as you want or as light as you want. According to that Watercolor Society, pencil lines are okay to see through the transparent paint, okay, the watercolor. All right, so I'm going to show you here what to do, okay? So let's look at this, well actually let's look at this square here, okay? So this funky little wavy line going through there, we're going to call it that's a tree branch, okay? So I'm going to paint this square and then this little triangle up here. I'm going to paint those to be the same color because it's actually the same space, okay? So I could paint in a technique called dry brush where I'm just painting my color right in, like so. But notice each time I lift up my paintbrush, there's so much water in my paintbrush that it kind of leaves that darker color. And I'm okay with that. And actually sometimes I like to go back in and I like to drop in some more paint. But again, that's just my style because I like that dark, bold color and pigment. My brain is just attracted to really bright, intense colors. That's just how I function. And so then at this point, I'm going to take a little bit of salt. If I can get a little salt. And then sprinkle it on that area. Okay, don't go crazy. These are tiny little areas. And then I would paint this same 1-inch square. It's just the other half of it. It's just divided by my little tree branch. And I'm going to paint that also. And then put a little salt on it. Now, I cannot paint the square right next to it or it's going to bleed into each other. So you need to be certain that you're mixing or skipping around, okay? So I might be okay to paint this one even though those corners kind of match up right there. But don't be afraid to turn your painting as you're working on it. And I'm just kind of spreading this out. And then I just like that wet to wet technique, you guys. I'm going to drop a little more paint in there. Lift up. And notice I didn't even reload my paintbrush. It just still, you know, that's why I love these paintbrushes too. They just hold a lot of color, a lot of water. And there we go. And a little salt in there. Now, you can put the salt wherever you want on your painting. Again, I was just kind of trying to go for that Starry Night type thing, so that's what I did. I put my salt in the background. You can put it on the leaves, you could put it on your ground, you could put it on the tree bark, but that is the one technique that I would like for you to include in your painting, okay? So as you're working on this, if you have any questions about, you know, you're wanting a little bit of feedback on your painting, please just go ahead and snap a picture of it and just, you know, you could just email it to me, but let's just say the other option is submitting it to the actual assignment, but then tell me that you want feedback. You know, does that make sense? Because obviously I'm going to see that your painting isn't done, but we could work on feedback that way. Yeah, so good luck and happy painting.